Wish TV. All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Don't let high golf rates drive you out of bounds. Save big with the Wish TV Great Golf Club Card.
Central Indiana's largest golf club card membership is back for the 8th season with more courses than ever before. Save over 75% on tee times at 27 Central Indiana golf courses. All you need is the Wish TV Great Golf Club Card. Cards are valid for the entire 2026 golf season.
Great courses, great savings. Score your Great Golf Club Card today.
Central Indiana. Wish TV is now live on YouTube TV and Hulu Live, offering more hours of local programming than any other station. Search for Wish TV or look for CW8 on both YouTube TV and Hulu Live to find us. Watch local news, sports, and lifestyle shows live from Wish TV. You can still catch Wish TV free over the air or stream it live on wishtv.com and on the free Wish TV mobile apps. Wish TV, available in more places for the latest news, weather, and sports.
And welcome back to another edition of All Indiana Politics Conversations. I'm Garrett Bergquist, the producer of All Indiana Politics, and joining us once again, State Representative Ed DeLaney. Representative, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So in our first two parts of this series, we talked about your legal career, we talked about your upbringing, we also talked about the arbitration that you did related to the Dayton Peace Accords. Now we're going to put it all together. What first drew you to politics?
Well, I may have said this, but John Kennedy drew me to politics. My family was interested at a very low level. My mother worked in the voting booth and so forth. The voting place, we had booths, separate booths in the neighborhood for that. And that got me started. And then Kennedy really drew my attention. And then I got interested in college in international relations, so that just added to, I paid attention to Congress about something other than the taxes. So it just took off, and I got here in the early 70s, and I ran for city council within 2 years and got the bug. And I got used to getting beat, but I have hoped that eventually I wouldn't get beat.
I understand that before you served in the legislature, you served on the Indiana Finance Development Authority Board?
Yeah, I was, this sort of a predecessor, what's now called the Indiana Finance Authority, so I was the chairman of that board under Governor Bai, I think in his second term. So I got pretty familiar with government financing, economic development support, loans, and so forth. Yeah, it was a very useful experience, and I've put it to some use now that I'm in the General Assembly.
What are some insights that you gained into the way the state functions from that?
What I learned was you need to have simple programs that are available to existing businesses, something we still don't have down. We have too many economic development programs. They're too complex, and they're too heavily weighted towards drawing in some wonderful some wonderful company from another state or some big deal. I don't think we pay enough attention to the problems of our smaller businesses that want to grow or that would simply want to survive. So that's been a struggle, and I think the Economic Development Commission is part of the problem. They like to have a cafeteria of complex, often almost identical programs. I think they're just confusing the potential users of their services.
How did you decide to run for the State House?
I had been a contributor and friend and maybe half of an advisor to a guy named David Orntlicker, who was the representative on the north side of Indianapolis. He decided to run for Congress. Late on one year, it would have been 2008, he called me one night in January when there was little time left to file or not and said that he decided he wasn't going to file for re-election, and he thought I might be able to do the job. Would I be willing to run? I said, I haven't run for office in 30 years. Could you give me 24 hours to think? I talked to my wife, Ann, and I said, sure, here I go. So it was a great year to run. It was the Obama year. I mean, this sounds incredible, but a Democrat won the presidential race in November in Indiana. So it was a great year, and it was a great district. I like to kid about it. 1/3 of my people were poor, 3 of my people were billionaires, and I had everything in between. It was a great district. Ran into Hamilton County, ran down to Fall Creek in Indianapolis. I enjoyed going door to door, meeting people, so I got the bug again.
Now, were Democrats still in control of the state house in your first term?
For 2 years, I was in the majority, and I like to say I didn't know what it meant. I didn't fully know yet how to take advantage of it. I had some people really help me get some things passed by tucking it into their bills. I wasn't familiar with all the inner workings, and I didn't have a committee chairmanship or anything. But I had some success. But then, since then, I've learned how to be in the minority. I've tried to be effective in the minority, which is a very different role than people play it differently. I play it my own way.
What are some things that surprised you the most when you first got to the General Assembly?
Well, the power of the committee chairman and the power of the speaker. I had been aware of our system. The speaker is a lot less powerful than they were in the 70s or 80s. The speaker, no bill could be called to the floor unless the speaker agreed. The speaker called the bills. That meant you could have gotten a bill all the way up ready to go for final passage, and the speaker decided no. The speaker now uses the calendar to do that. He'll put you at the bottom of a pile, and maybe you'll never get your turn. But so I learned that the committee chairs were quite powerful, as was the speaker, and I learned how these things work, and I learned how to work across the aisle because, we had 52 votes, but we had nothing going for us in the Senate. So we had to find a way to work with the Republicans, even though we were in the majority in the House. That was an interesting experience, but unfortunately it only lasted 2 years, and we've been in the wilderness since.
Yeah, and that leads me in my next question. So 2010 election happens. The State House flips back to Republican control. Republicans now have a trifecta, which they've had ever since. And that was the year of the walkout over what was referred to as right-to-work legislation. Tell me about that experience.
Well, that was an interesting experience. Yeah, I remember the most important thing in many ways in the long term that happened in 2010 was the Tea Party showed up, and I made an effort to understand them. I'm not sure I succeeded, but so the first thing they did when they got the majority was to redistrict in a way that was we've never gotten out from under that, and it just gets worse because the computers get better and the courts have walked away. The courts say just do whatever you feel like. So now the trip to Illinois was something I didn't enjoy. We had several issues we could have broken the majority, broken the quorum. We had enough people. We had 40-some. So the big fight was redistricting. The other big fight was whether union dues could be collected from all members of a union, whether they wanted to pay them or not. It's a pretty simple issue. It seemed to me an equitable issue. That was very important to the National Party, and that's really why we went to Illinois, because of trying to be part of a national effort to protect the union movement. We didn't go over redistricting. That would have been, in my view, a better choice, because I think the public would understand why a party caucus would, basically break the quorum over an issue like whether they could have any seats in the future. I think the public would understand that. But anyway, we went to Illinois. We were there way too long. In my view, we had achieved what we could in the first few days because we got an agreement that bill would not move that year. We all knew what that meant. We just kicked it down the road for a year. And we weren't going back to Illinois again. It was just way too difficult in so many ways.
How has the dynamic within the General Assembly changed during your time there? Because when you got there, you had Republican Governor Mitch Daniels. Republicans have controlled the state Senate since, I believe, 77 or 78.
79.
79, okay. And then, but Democrats still controlled the House. Then over time, you had Republicans gain control of the House, and then over time move up into supermajority status.
Right. We've suffered with that. And, you've had to adjust or adapt. We have some districts, part of the redistricting is that some of our districts are literally too safe, okay? So the Democratic incumbent doesn't necessarily have to make a big effort just to be reelected. And so that's a problem. On the other side, there are too many Republicans who realize that they could get something for their district or something they particularly care about, but they're within the power of their supermajority, and they better toe the line. I think one of the things we lost is the ability to work across the aisle when necessary. And an example, I say this quite openly, we had a big debate in, I think it was 2017, about the increase in the gas tax. Because statewide, the roads are in terrible shape. Interstates, state highways, terrible. And we had a chance to raise the gas tax by, I think it was 10 cents a gallon. The Republicans had probably 55 or 60 votes, but they couldn't get more than 45 or so of their members. So they came hunting, and I said, I'll be one of the Democrats who will agree to this, because I think it's absolutely vital to our community to have these roads, and this is the only way we're going to get it done is by increasing the gas tax. So there was a negotiation, and we found the votes on our side to put it over the top. I thought that was a good example of democracy at work at some price. I mean, because people weren't happy that we had an increased gas tax.
You had a front row seat to how the state responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and the protests that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, that was very, very difficult. I don't normally give him a lot of credit, but I think Governor Holcomb handled it very well. He didn't take a strong position one way or the other. He was really in charge. The legislature had all these bills about how, you can't be required to wear a mask, and you don't have to act in a healthy fashion. And who needs vaccinations? We had all that stuff, and there was a lot of noise and controversy. But the governor, basically, in my mind, pretended that there was nobody named Trump, and that he was in charge of the health operations, which he was, and that he didn't need to make a lot of noise about it. And he just did, I think, a very good job of essentially following the best recommendations of the medical profession. He had this Dr. Box, who was his spokesperson. She was brilliant at the job. She had a lot of credibility. So we got through it. We had, symbolic measures and anger in the Republican caucus. Unfortunately, some of that lasts. I mean, we struggled with public health. We managed to finally, just 2 or 3 years ago, do something to increase our public health system, and then we basically cut their legs off last year. And that's because the right-wing element of the Republicans doesn't really believe in public health. They think we don't need doctors' advice. We need to go out on the internet and talk to our friends and decide about health care. And there's no public need. There's no obligation to anybody else that I get vaccinated. It's only about me. And that's coming back. So I think we're going to go the wrong way on public health. We've been going there since the last year or two. It'll get worse with these new members on the Senate side.
What are some major lessons learned from that experience, from the period of 2020 and 2021?
Well, I think this is a fancy word. I think many of the interests of the legislators are too parochial. And by that I mean they're worried about whether there'll be $50 for a new project in their small town or their city, whatever it might be. They're worried about that. They're worried about their image. They don't think more broadly. A good example, sort of safe example. They're all worked up about the liquor laws. My God, we have more liquor laws than any other laws in the state, and they little quibbles, how old they have to be to go in here, and can the kids see the bar and a restaurant, all that stuff. So they fight. They get tied up in that. They don't have time to sit back and say, what are we doing to our public health? What are we doing to our public education, broadly? Not just am I helping my school district, but are we tearing the system down or building it up? So I think that's one of the problems with the health issue. We got off our turf. We're not doctors. We didn't want to participate in a national program if the Democrats were in. It'd been okay if the Republicans were in. So we got into a lot of, let's say, ill thought out and rather partisan reactions. It was not a pleasant time, and physically it was hard. It was like being in a grammar school. We didn't meet in our normal chambers. We met in what looks like a high school cafeteria. It was very much like a high school cafeteria. Each one of us had our own table, about the size of an ordinary desk. We couldn't be near each other. And the speaker allowed the more childlike members to all sit in one corner together. It was like grammar school again. They were passing notes and laughing and telling stories. I mean, it was a bad scene, At one point it erupted into near violence over one particular issue. So, yeah, it was, I don't want to go there again. Nobody does.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about the General Assembly?
I think they think it's easier to pass a law than it should be. That's common. So if I get an idea that's important to me, I call my legislator. If I can convince them to go on a crusade about it, they don't understand. There's a reason to have a part-time legislator. I used to be pretty dubious about that idea when I wasn't a legislator. I've come around. My Republican friends used to tell me, my Republican clients used to say before I was in the legislature, we got to part-time. That's the most sacred thing about our legislature is that it's part-time. I didn't understand. Well, the consequence of being part-time is we have to have a limited agenda. So what happens is a lot of people, citizens, have ideas that may be good ideas, and the legislator may support it. There just literally isn't time. It can't be done. We can only have so many votes, so many committees, so many hearings when we have an automatic deadline, basically, of like March 15th in the short year, and like April 30 in the long year. And that's a good thing. If you believe, I don't like this term small government. I like the term focused government. If you believe that we ought to be focused, then this is a help. Where we get in trouble, and it's where we're in trouble now, is we're not using this time limitation to focus on the big issues. We're using it to focus on symbolic issues that some of the Republican right-wingers get all worked up about. They're looking for DEI in the wastebaskets. They're pretending that we're running the immigration system for the United States of America. They're depending that China is attacking Indiana. I mean, they're distracted. So the mechanism of a citizen part-time legislature is being undercut by social and ideological issues.
What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned overall from your time in the General Assembly?
Well, I've learned that a smile is a good thing to have. I've learned that as long as I put some humor into my comments, even when they're harsh, that people will be willing to talk to me. I have a good communication with a lot of Republicans, and I learned a great deal about them individually, but also about what might be effective on my part. So I think that's the number one lesson for me. Now, there's different views. Some people will never go to the microphone. I try not to abuse the microphone, but I talk on a lot of issues, including things that I'm not on the committees related to. But I've learned to try to keep it fairly brief, have a little humor, be human, be friendly with everybody, and that somebody who I bitterly disagree with may turn out to be an ally on another issue that I can't know in advance. But if I'm accessible, they'll come up to me and they'll help me get something done that they and I want to do. And that's a great thing. That's part of my function being in the minority. I've got to do that, and I've got to use mechanisms. I use the rules. So I hope I'm a part-time master of the rules of the House, and I use the amendment process because it's hard to push a bill through when you're in my position. It rarely happens. So I come up with amendments that are designed either to embarrass them or send signals to them or even occasionally give them an idea that they'll like, and they vote for my amendments from time to time. Some of my proudest moments come when I propose an amendment and the Speaker delays the bill. It was going to be heard today, and my amendment was going to be heard today. The Speaker delays the bill. A Republican takes my amendment and files the identical thing over their name. Next day, the Speaker calls their amendment, which is exactly the same as mine, up, and it passes. I say, I wanted this to pass substantively. I'd like to be able to say it was my amendment, but the result's what matters. So that's just my game. Other people are quiet. How do I call it? They stand in the corners all the time talking to Republican friends endlessly. They never go to the microphone. They never say what they're doing, but they get something done. I can see people getting things done just through pure social contact. It's wonderful to watch.
Yeah, everybody has their own legislating style.
Absolutely. And, and I think that contributes to the system. The great weakness right now is because of the supermajority and the pressure it puts on the members of the supermajority. There's very little debate now. I was reading on one of the important bills this year. I think it was the redistricting one. 26 or 8 of the 30 Democrats spoke and 2 Republicans. They don't feel the necessity to explain. And what they're forgetting and what happens is the way they explain to the public is through what they say and do at the House, at the legislature. And if they don't bother to explain it to the legislature, the public doesn't know. I think, for example, I'm sitting here talking to you. I think the Democrats are much more accessible to the press, partly because we have time, partly because we believe in it. The Republicans are very cautious. I think they're they don't put out a lot of press commentary because everything is decided in a closed caucus where they go meet by themselves and decide things. And they don't see the need to explain themselves a lot. Maybe we're griping a lot, but we're also trying to explain ourselves.
I want to tie our conversation back to the things we've discussed over our previous 2 parts of this series. What are some of the biggest lessons from your previous experiences, whether it's in the Dayton Peace Accords, whether it's working for IRE, whether it's your service in the Navy, your time in college, what have you? What are some of the biggest lessons that you've taken from that and you have applied to your service in the General Assembly?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the first things you got to understand what forum you're in. I mean, there was a big difference between trying a case to a judge and trying a case to a jury, a huge difference. So I think I've learned to read my audience and read my context. Where am I at? Am I in a committee hearing where I've got a smaller number of people to convince? I've got probably live witnesses as opposed to just talking. That's a different game. I try to take some of my lawyer skills as far as questioning witnesses. So I think that's part of what I've learned in the process and from this overviews. I'm just thinking today about an issue on this issue of the recounts that may occur among the Republicans. I have experience with arbitrations, which are similar in that 3 people decide something. It's not a public vote. It's just a, grind through issues. I'm making direct analogies in my mind as to how that game is played, the arbitration game. So, yeah, it's been beneficial. I think that the number one thing that's weighing on me, and I think this is part of being a lawyer broadly, is that lawyers are by definition institutionalists. They're rule followers or maybe rule users. They know how to use the legal system. And they have restraints and limitations, and you can literally lose your license if you do certain things. There's no restraint right now in the legislature. There's no tradition. There's no sense of, this isn't our topic, or it's not a topic that we need to spend a lot of our time on. We need to focus on our central functions like education and taxation. I think one of the reasons we have trouble with the tax bill is nobody spends time really thinking it through. The number of people who deeply understand our tax system in the legislature is not very high, because we're forgetting one of the most fundamental things we do as a state and as a legislature is to tax people. And it has to have credibility. It has to be understood and accepted. It's never going to be liked. People don't like any tax, but they've got to have belief that the system as a whole is balanced and isn't aimed at them in a negative way. We're losing that. So I'm trying to push back, and I'd like to have more people in the legislature pay more attention to these fiscal issues. It's hard. It's much harder work. Let me explain that to you. Okay. It's much harder work than worrying about what kind of alcohol can be put in soda bottles.
What advice would you have for anybody running for public office?
Well, be ready to be criticized fairly and unfairly. Respond to the fair criticisms. Ignore the unfair criticisms. It's that simple. You got to pay attention to the unfair criticisms. You can't allow your reputation to be ruined over something that's not fairly presented and maybe isn't even very important. It's just symbolic. You don't want to get beat up over a symbolic mistake. Okay. So I think that's the key thing, and you have to be interested, and you have to be willing to give up your time, and sometimes you have to listen to debates that are of no interest and no importance because that's just part of your job. You got to put a smile on your face and do that, and keep yourself ready for the moments when you can achieve something. So it's a very interesting game, and it reminds me of the courtroom. I got beat by lawyers who I thought had absolutely no courtroom skills at all. All they had was a good client and a good set of facts and the right jury. Darn. And they beat me. Well, in the legislature, you've got to think those things through. What's worth my fighting about? What's important broadly? What am I likely to win on? What's going to bruise me beyond this issue? You only have so much capital. I mean, that's the whole thing. You're spending your capital and you're either growing or shrinking your capital while you're doing it. That's why I enjoy it. I do enjoy the place. I don't apologize for it. Some people act like I should apologize for the fact that I like being in the legislature. I'm not going to do that. I do like it. I don't like it as much now because of this institutional issue, and maybe this is a selfish view. I think we have too few lawyers. The public thinks we're all lawyers. There are actually very few lawyers. There's 7 or 8 in the House out of 100. We need more who are more rules-oriented, process-oriented, structurally-oriented people, and we do better. So that's sort of one of my pet peeves. I go speak to bar association groups, and I try to get young lawyers to go. Economically, it's hard. But it's true for everybody. It can be very economically difficult to be in the legislature because it's going to take a lot of your time in big chunks when the rest of the world that you're in has to be ignored, whether it's your job or your family. So that downside is there.
Ed DeLaney represents the north side of Indianapolis in the Indiana House of Representatives. Representative, thank you for coming in for this series.
I appreciate it. Enjoy yourself, and I'll be listening in to the other people, too. Thanks.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.